Claire Hastings adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag as she stepped onto the manicured grounds of the Langley estate. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the immaculately trimmed hedges and stately oak trees. Despite the golden light, an unease settled in Claire's chest. She had never imagined herself amidst such opulence, an estate belonging to one of the wealthiest families in the country. But tonight, she wasn't here as a guest. She was here because of a clause buried in the will of Victor Langley's late grandfather. A clause that named Claire as a bride, an arrangement neither of them sought but were bound to by legal obligation. Victor Langley's tall figure appeared, sharply dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. His piercing blue eyes met hers with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Victor was the heir to the sprawling fortune, a man accustomed to control and command. His jaw tensed visibly as he spoke, every word carefully measured. "Miss Hastings, I assume you understand why you're here? The conditions are non-negotiable." Claire squared her shoulders, refusing to show the storm brewing within. "I understand the letter of the will, Mr. Langley. But I do not accept it as my fate. I'm not a prize to be claimed or an obligation to be fulfilled." Victor's lips thinned into a faint smirk. "The late grandfather's wishes are clear, and while I would have preferred otherwise, we must comply. You will stay here until the matter is settled." Their eyes locked, two wills clashing amid the grandeur of a house filled with whispers and expectations. In that moment, Claire knew she was not just fighting for herself but for the freedom to choose who she could become. The morning after her arrival at the Langley estate, Claire Hastings awoke to a room she scarcely recognized as belonging to her. Heavy curtains filtered the pale sunlight, casting muted shadows over the ornate furnishings she struggled to reconcile with her own modest life back in the city. The polished mahogany desk gleamed in the corner, and the air carried the faint scent of lavender from the bouquet Victor's housekeeper had placed on the bedside table. It was beautiful, but it also felt foreign, a gilded cage that reminded Claire of her delicate predicament. Downstairs, the estate buzzed with quiet activity. Servants moved gracefully, and family members exchanged curt nods and polite greetings. The grandeur of the place, however, came with its own unspoken codes of behavior, and Claire, an outsider thrust into this world, could feel the prickly stares slicing through her every step. Victor Langley was already at the breakfast table, his posture rigid and his expression unreadable as he read the morning paper under the broad chandelier's glittering light. When Claire entered the dining room, dressed simply but neatly, conversation ceased abruptly. The few family members present exchanged quick glances, the undercurrent of judgment palpable. Victor looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. "Miss Hastings," he said, his voice cool but laced with something sharper. "I trust you're finding yourself settled." Claire met his gaze evenly. "I'm managing." He folded the paper and set it aside. "You must understand, this is not just about you or me. The family's reputation, our legacy, depends on appearances. I expect you to comport yourself accordingly." The admonition felt less like a courteous warning and more like a warning shot. Claire's cheeks flushed, not from embarrassment but from the simmering irritation of being treated like a mere accessory. Was this supposed to be her new reality? A pawn in a game she had no interest in playing? Over the following days, Claire endeavored to assert herself, attending social gatherings and family dinners that felt more like auditions than celebrations. Victor's dismissive tone never faltered. At one luncheon, when she offered a thoughtful opinion on the estate's charitable foundation, Victor interrupted with a curt, "Leave the funding discussions to the board. This isn't a role for you." Claire clenched her fork, biting back a retort. The jeers among the guests were quieter but no less cutting. They whispered about her sudden appearance, questioning her motives, her background, a woman thrust upon their family by a peculiar legal footnote. Yet, she remained outwardly composed, refusing to collapse under the weight of their condescension. Outside the grand windows, the estate's gardens were meticulously maintained, but the cold beauty of the landscape mirrored her own feelings of isolation. Claire longed for a familiar comfort, for space where she could breathe without judgment. One evening, as the wind picked up and rain began to patter softly against the glass panes, Claire took refuge in the library, a cavernous room crammed with leather-bound volumes. The quiet solitude was a balm, a place where she could collect her scattered thoughts. Victor appeared silently by the doorway, spotting her amidst the shadows and soft lamplight. "You should not be alone here," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. Claire looked up, surprised by the softness in his tone. "And why not?" Victor hesitated. "This house, it demands adherence. Visitors like you unsettle that balance." She studied him, glimpsing something behind the hard exterior, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even reluctance. "Or maybe it's that you don't want to be unsettled." He exhaled slowly, stepping toward a fire that crackled quietly in the hearth. "Perhaps." Claire's eyes searched his face. In that moment, the layers of wealth and pride began to peel away, revealing a man wrestling with his own contradictions. But it was not enough to temper the tension among the family and staff. Gossip swirled. Claire caught whispers of skepticism and whispered warnings about her intentions. She was repeatedly underestimated, labeled as a gold digger or an opportunist merely because she was thrust into this world that was not hers by birth. The sting was real, but it fueled a quiet resolve. One afternoon, while walking along the estate's winding paths, Claire encountered Mary, the housekeeper. The older woman's kindly eyes softened when Claire recounted the coldness she felt from most family members. "We all have our roles here," Mary said softly. "But you're different. That's what scares them." Claire nodded, grateful for the small kindness. "I just want to be seen as who I am. Not as this clause, not as a replacement or a placeholder." Mary's expression betrayed years of wisdom. Sometimes showing who you are means standing your ground even when the world expects you to bend. That night, the oppressive quiet of the estate felt heavier. Words exchanged earlier between Claire and Victor echoed in her mind, and a burning frustration took hold. She paced her room until exhaustion pulled her toward the window. Rain fell steadily now, blurring the outlines of the gardens below. Her thoughts roiled. Could she endure the unyielding judgment? Could she carve out a place where she could exist on her own terms, rather than as a provision in a grandfather's will? It was then, as the storm raged outside, that the notion of leaving solidified. Walking out into the storm felt like the ultimate act of rebellion and self-preservation. But just as she prepared to cross the threshold, a shadow fell across the sill. Victor stood there, rain-dampened and uncharacteristically undone. "You can't leave," he said quietly. "Not yet." Claire's breath hitched. Was this an act of control, or something else? Their eyes met, an unspoken tension suspended between them. Neither willing to concede, yet neither fully able to sever the fragile cord binding their fate. In that charged moment, Claire understood that this story was far from over. The question was whether she would stay and fight or walk away, and if walking away meant losing not just a place, but a chance at something neither of them expected. Have you ever felt trapped by circumstances beyond your control, questioning whether to stay or leave? Claire's courage invites reflection on what it truly means to choose your own path, even when the world tries to decide for you. The days that followed were a tumult of emotions and unexpected realizations for Claire Hastings. Though the initial shock of her arrival at the Langley estate had somewhat plateaued, the undercurrents of tension only deepened. She found herself caught in a complex web, not merely of obligations drawn up by a will, but of expectations, judgments, and power struggles that swirled relentlessly around her. Claire's quiet moments were often spent staring out across the vast gardens, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. The promise of autonomy felt more distant than ever. Each interaction with Victor Langley gnawed at her resolve. Though his coldness was undeniable, there were glimmers of something far less easy to define beneath that stern facade. Her own strength flickered between fierce determination and painful self-doubt. She questioned whether she was truly ready for this uncompromising world or if she was merely a pawn, destined to be cast aside. What was it about her that provoked such hostility? Was it her unwillingness to simply acquiesce to the role prescribed? Or did her presence remind the Langley family of something or someone they preferred to keep buried? This tension came to a head during an opulent family dinner, where the weight of old traditions pressed down like a physical force. Claire had made the bold choice to wear a dress that was both elegant and expressive of her own style, a quiet rebellion against the rigid codes upheld by the family. Halfway through the meal, Victor's uncle, Charles Langley, cast a condescending glance in her direction. "Miss Hastings," Charles said in dripping tones, "you must understand this family holds certain standards. One cannot simply defy them without consequence." Claire met his gaze steadily. "I'm here not to defy, but to be found genuine acceptance." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the clinking of silverware and whispered conversations. Victor's eyes darkened, his voice low yet sharp. "Enough, Charles. This is not a matter of standards, but respect, and Miss Hastings has every right to expect it." A subtle but palpable shift rippled through the room. Some murmurs quieted, others grew sharper, yet no one dared challenge Victor openly. This small show of support unsettled more than just the guests, it unsettled Victor himself. His loyalty, tangled between family pride and the strange new feelings Claire had stirred, became increasingly conflicted. Amid this growing storm, Claire discovered an unexpected complication hidden within the documents related to the grandfather's will. In a quiet moment with Victor, she revealed that a clause allowed her certain discretionary privileges, far beyond the mere obligation of marriage. This discovery was her first real leverage, a sliver of control in a situation previously dictated by others. Victor's face betrayed a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by a tightening of his jaw. "It seems the old man had his own complexities," he muttered, almost to himself. "This changes things." Claire sensed the significance in his words. For the first time, the balance of power between them felt not entirely predetermined, but open to negotiation. It was an unspoken invitation born of grudging respect and cautious curiosity. Yet the revelation only intensified the scrutiny Claire endured. Rumors spread throughout the estate, whispers questioning whether she was aware of that clause all along or if it was a maneuver to upend the family's expectations. Those who viewed her as a threat became more vociferous in their disdain. The cold distance from Victor, once absolute, showed nuanced cracks. He found himself watching Claire with a mixture of wariness and reluctant admiration. The sharp edges of his previous demeanor softened imperceptibly when they crossed paths in the corridors or during the occasional, unexpected conversation. One particularly quiet afternoon, they stood side by side in the estate's vast greenhouse, surrounded by blooming orchids and delicate ferns. The sunlight filtered through the glass in dappled patches, warming the cool air that carried the scent of earth and growth. Claire dared to break the silence. "Do you ever think about what it means to choose? Beyond obligations and expectations?" Victor pondered, hands tucked into his pockets. "I've been so focused on what I must do, I've rarely asked myself what I want." A flicker of vulnerability crossed his face, fleeting, yet unmistakable. Claire looked at him, recognizing in that moment the same internal battles she fought. Perhaps that was what connected them, a shared struggle against roles imposed by legacy and duty. With her newfound knowledge of the will's discretion and Victor's subtle shifts, Claire felt a tentative hope grow. Yet it was tempered by the hostility around her, family members whispering, casting shadows on every step she took. Her inner storm raged in parallel, between the courage she summoned each day and a persistent, gnawing fear of failure. The path forward was uncertain, crowded with obstacles she hadn't anticipated. One evening, Claire sat alone in the drawing room, the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows upon the walls. She folded the folded parchment of the grandfather's will carefully in her hands, reading and rereading its words even as fatigue tugged at her eyelids. Her thoughts spiraled to Victor, his unexpected moments of kindness, his unyielding pride, and the grudging respect that seemed to be growing between them. Was there room amid this conflict for something more profound? Could the rigid lines drawn by protocol and inheritance blur enough to welcome trust? But before she could entertain those fragile hopes, the tension that had been mounting suddenly exploded. A group of Langley relatives confronted her in the Great Hall, their voices low but sharp. "You undermine the family's honor by challenging tradition," Charles accused, stepping forward. "This is not your place." Claire stood tall, refusing to back down. "I am not here to erase the past, but to write a future that includes truth, without fear or falsehood." Victor, entering behind her, silenced the room with a glance. "Claire Hastings has the right to be here, to make choices, and to be respected. Those who doubt that will answer to me." The room trembled with suppressed resentment and rising tension. The line between ally and adversary blurred as Victor's unexpected defense of Claire marked a turning point, not an end but a beginning. Late that night, Claire reflected in her chamber, the weight of the day pressing upon her. It was clear the battle was far from over. But somewhere within the tumult, she found a whisper of quiet strength, the understanding that her voice mattered, and that sometimes, standing firm against the weight of expectation was the first step toward true freedom. What would you do if your fate seemed dictated by others? Would you remain silent or fight to reclaim your own voice? Claire's journey reminds us all that courage is often quiet, persistent, and fiercely necessary. As the story unfolds, who truly holds the power, the one who commands with wealth or the one who stands unshaken in their own truth? Tension in the Langley estate deepened as the days slid toward a reckoning neither Claire Hastings nor Victor Langley could fully predict. Their encounters had grown more charged, each charged glance and hesitant word weighing heavily, hinting at an emotion neither was yet prepared to name. Between them hung a delicate balance, obligation and resistance, suspicion and curiosity, pride and vulnerability. Victor found himself unable to shake the tension gnawing at his thoughts. The will stipulation pressed down like a shadow, but Claire's unexpected discovery of the hidden clause presented an opening, a crack where something else might slip through, something unspoken yet undeniable. One late afternoon, the estate's corridors were hushed, filtered lights softening the grand wood paneling. Victor found Claire in the drawing room, seated by the window with a book splayed carelessly on her lap, her expression distant. Steeling himself, he approached silently. "Claire," he said, his voice lower than usual, almost hesitant. She looked up, their eyes meeting, unmasked and wary. "There's something I need to say," he began. "This arrangement, this whole situation, it's never been just about duty for me. I didn't expect to feel anything. But that's the truth, whether I want to admit it or not." Claire's breath caught. The words lingered between them, fragile as glass. "You mean, you've fallen in love with me?" Victor's gaze dropped, a flush coloring his cheek. "I don't know how it happened. I only know that when you almost left, something inside me shattered. It was as if losing you would mean losing more than just an obligation." Claire's heart thundered, a mix of surprise and guarded hope washing over her. Yet trust was slow to bloom in a soil so rocky. "How do I know this isn't just another form of control? Another way the family tries to dictate what I should feel?" He met her eyes again, steady and sincere. "Because I want to try, to build something real. Not bound by the will, but by choice." Their shared silence was charged with possibilities, their fractured pasts tentative foundations for a fragile future. Outside, the sun dipped low, spilling golden light across the room, illuminating not just Claire's face but the fear and longing that mirrored in Victor's. But this fragile hope was not yet shared by the others. Rumors and suspicions remained, the Langley family's glare sharp as ever. Claire sensed their battle was far from over, but the seeds of change had been sown. That evening, as the household gathered for an intimate dinner, Victor announced his support openly, unwavering and unequivocal. "Claire Hastings is not merely an obligation. She is my chosen partner." Some faces paled, others drew tight with restrained fury, but Victor's declaration was a turning point. Claire felt a surge of unexpected strength, tempered by the knowledge that this was just the beginning. Later, in private, Claire sought Victor out. "If what you say is true," she challenged softly, "then prove it with your actions, not just words." Victor nodded, eyes earnest. "I will. I swear." The storm of resistance that had once seemed impenetrable was beginning to erode, replaced by something tentative but profoundly new, a real possibility for partnership grounded in respect and affection. In the quiet aftermath of that evening, both understood that their journey remained fraught with uncertainty, but also ripe with hope. They were poised on the edge of transformation, between legacy and love, obligation and freedom. Have you ever felt the tension between what is expected and what your heart desires? Claire and Victor's story reflects the courage it takes to embrace vulnerability, to risk everything for a chance at genuine connection. Stay with us as their journey unfolds toward a climax that promises both challenge and redemption. The grand hall of the Langley estate stood bathed in warm light, every crystal chandelier shimmering like captured stars as the family gathered once more. The air hummed with anticipation, murmurs rippling through the crowd like a low tide as Claire Hastings entered with calm determination. Tonight was more than just a formal gathering. It was the moment where years of static tension would either break or bind them all forever. Claire's dress, simple yet elegant, felt like armor as she walked beside Victor Langley, who clad himself in a dark suit, his gaze steady and unwavering. Their presence together was a statement in itself, a challenge to the old order, a refusal to be defined by the cold clauses of a will. Victor's voice rang clear as he addressed the assembly. "We are here not to uphold outdated traditions alone, but to create a future where respect and love serve as our foundation." His eyes found Claire's, a spark of shared resolve passing between them. Claire Hastings has honored this family not only by accepting its burdens but by demanding we all rise above them. Murmurs of surprise and awkward silence greeted his words, many family members rigid with restrained disbelief. Charles Langley, his uncle and longtime guardian of family customs, shifted uneasily in his seat, his lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Claire stepped forward, voice steady and unwavering. "I stand before you not as an intruder or a duty fulfilled, but as a person who deserves to be seen and heard. The clause in the will did not write all our stories, it was a condition, not a conclusion. I accept the responsibility, but on my own terms." Her words rippled through the room like a fresh wind, unsettling but invigorating. Some eyes softened with grudging respect, others narrowed, clouded with resistance. Yet in that moment, Claire felt the weight she had carried lift slightly, as if the long, winding battle towards self-acceptance and mutual respect had finally turned a corner. The judgments that once shadowed her days began to falter, replaced by a new dialogue born from her courage. Those who had whispered doubts now hesitated, confronted with undeniable truth. She was not just a clause in legal text, but a woman who had claimed her own fate. As the evening wore on, the Langley family gathered under one roof in a way they hadn't before. Old grievances softened in the warmth of candid conversation. Laughter, tentative but genuine, began to weave through the hall where once only silence or tension had ruled. Victor and Claire, side by side, shared glances tinged with both relief and budding joy. It was not the fairy tale of effortless love, but something raw and earned, rooted in respect, growth, and the difficult journey toward trust. Later, as the estate's grand doors closed behind departing guests, Claire stood on the balcony overlooking the vast gardens bathed in moonlight. Victor joined her quietly, his hand finding hers in the cool night air. "I never imagined this could be real," he admitted softly. "Not in the way you've made it real." Claire squeezed his hand, a smile touching her lips. "Neither did I. But choosing each other, it's the greatest freedom we have." If Claire's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate resilience, hope, and the transformative power of connection. See you in our next story.